After 13 years in corporate law, working in tier one law firms in India as mergers and acquisitions partner, Aparna Mittal took an unexpected step in 2018. She quit law firm partnership and set up the Samāna Centre for Gender Policy and Law. Samana was the first of its kind in India, a niche B2B legal advisory focused on anti-discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, and workplace safety. Since 2018, Samana has advised leading international and domestic corporates, nonprofits, and educational entities over a wide variety of sectors. Aparna spoke to us at Bar and Bench in 2019 when she first took the leap, and she is back here with us today. Thank you, Aparna, for being here. Welcome back. Congratulations on Samana turning 7 years this year.
Thank you so much, Giti, and thanks to the Bar and Bench team for being one of our cheerleaders in this space.
Of course, of course. It's been 7 years of Samana now, as I just said. How do you feel now about the decision you made in 2018 to leave law firm partnership? How has your experience been?
I think Giti 2018 started with a very clear vision about what I wanted to do. I remember I had a blueprint and a business plan scribbled on 3 sheets of paper. And even though the market at that point of time, unfortunately, did not understand what I was setting out to do, I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I remember a senior founding partner to Tier 1 law firm had laughed at the idea, saying that, oh, you're setting up another NGO. And I had told him that he came from a space of a limited worldview and that internationally and globally, business and human rights, which is what Samana is all about, was really picking up eminence in global legal practice. And that we'll talk in a few years. Giti, like any other niche entrepreneurship, this of course came with its own highs and lows. I don't want to glorify entrepreneurship in just one direction. Of course, it is a lot of grueling hard work, innovation, agility, literally starting solo with a blank canvas, no ready references or precedents available to do what I wanted to do. But overall, I think the experience has been quite exhilarating and fulfilling. While we started with seeding ideas on what this work entailed, the important legal, business, and social case for corporates and other entities, because we are a B2B service provider, we work with corporates and corporate entities. I think in the long run, the work and the dimensions that we have traversed, even I did not imagine the expanse to which the business has grown or the professional work that comes in the space of business and human rights for us.
Okay. What kind of work has Samana engaged in these past 7 years? And what more have you taken on? What kind of organizations have you worked with so far?
I think answering that question, Giti, will take a few hours, but I will try and do that as simply as possible. So just to set a few, things on the record so that there's more clarity. This is a business and human rights focused practice. We focus on workplaces, and the practice has many dimensions to it. It can be anti-discrimination. It can be anti-harassment, which is both sexual variety and non-sexual variety, equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is doing more for persons who come from diverse identities, and ESG, which is also a dimension of business and human rights, as what the world is calling it now. In terms of our work, we focus on all aspects of human identity. I started with gender, but very quickly we were doing work on caste, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic backgrounds, age, disability. So we are pretty much multidimensional. We can cover any aspect of human identity that interfaces with a corporate or a corporatized workplace. Our practice is based on core legal and regulatory frameworks, but we are not limited by the legal and regulatory frameworks. So we leverage data, system design and change, psychology, human resources, basically whatever it takes to help the message on equality and equal treatment reach home. Giti, when you step back and you look at Indian law has several inherent limitations and gaps when it comes to actually implementing the constitutional mandate of non-discrimination and equality. Pretty much the constitutional fundamental rights cover the public sector, and the private sector remains largely untouched by it. There are, of course, micro laws that come up on rights of persons with disability or trans persons, but I see it as a jigsaw with a lot falling through the gaps and not a comprehensive, holistic anti-discrimination or equality law. And hence, I think legal policies, contracts, internal frameworks, processes, they gain predominant importance to really use them as a credible legal tool to create binding obligations and frameworks that bind a company, it binds the employees, and it is something you can institutionalize for the next few years or decades so that the company is meeting up to what is globally understood as good practices on business and human rights. In this background, in terms of the work that we do, and I'll try and give you some verticals to make it easier. We've set up policies, contracts, frameworks, and processes for the largest of conglomerates, multinationals, large Indian domestic companies, international nonprofits across borders. And we do that using not just Indian law, but also foreign law. So if you're working with somebody in the UK, we will look at the FCTO regulations as well. Because eventually, when you're drafting a policy, you can't do it in a silo and say, hey, this is Indian law, and that's all I do. Sometimes they want additional stuff to be incorporated based in FCTO regulation. And you can't just cut paste it. You have to see how will it work? Will it pass muster judicial intervention if it comes down to that? We've also developed quantitative and qualitative parameters. Giti, think of a 50-page legal, business, and data list of questions on the basis of which we assess corporates and corporatized entities. When I use the word corporatized entities, I mean the large nonprofits as well, which are practically a corporate entity because they have very detailed systemic frameworks on the basis of which they work. We interview 100 plus employees and we go back with a diagnostic report of sorts with gaps and issues and forward-looking recommendations to address the gaps and to help them move credibly forward on the equality and inclusion agenda. So we're not limited to just conversation. We really go back with a list of 100 things to do in terms of specific interventions to reach closer to the milestones.
In the last 7 years, if you could pick something, what sort of work that Samana has done has been most impactful? Can you give us maybe a few examples?
I'll do that. But just to complete the previous question, then we also do learning programs ranging from the CXOs to the internal legal HR, ESG teams, and every cadre of employee. So the idea is to diagnose, to create frameworks, and to do whatever it takes in whatever language or format to take the message home to all the stakeholders in a corporate entity.
Okay.
If I were to give you a few examples, okay, let me think about a few. I think first I would give the example of us working directly with the chairperson's office of two of India's largest conglomerates and the entire leadership team across verticals. So CEOs, managing directors, general counsel, CFO of about 25 of their business verticals, which cuts across 75, 80 companies in the group. We worked directly with them in a closed room to develop for both of them separately. For one, the LGBT inclusion initiatives, and for the other, workplace harassment initiatives, both sexual harassment and non-sexual harassment. It was a closed room, very serious discussion in a preemptive manner, not just to firefight when something goes wrong, but to look at the entire business, look at gaps, look at blind spots, look at areas where the law was not prescriptive and yet something could be a problem, to develop clear frameworks, and then years of work to work with the teams to develop multidimensional policies, contracts, assessments, workshops, initiatives, whatever it takes to push that mandate forward. So that's one example. Another example was working with one of the largest funding entities based in UK, which actually provides funding to Indian companies on evaluating the intended portfolio entity or the grantee entity on the SNG or the social and governance of ESG, DE&I, and anti-harassment parameters. So doing that, we use UK law, we use Indian law, and also the parameters that we have developed to make sure it was a comprehensive and holistic assessment. Then you develop mitigation plans, then you revise their policies and contracts to reach that particular gold standard that we want to set out for them. And it closes up with learning sessions for whoever is in the fray to make sure that nobody misses the message on what is intended to be done. Another last example is we
Yes,
worked with a
please.
large European client, which has 10,000 plus employees across 44 countries, on multiple initiatives on addressing racial discrimination and one on LGBT inclusion. So the work pretty much that comes in is dynamic. Sometimes there is no precedent. You start with a blank sheet of paper and you start thinking what you're going to cover. Then you use the law and then you use other aspects of what you want to holistically develop something that works for that client and country.
Okay. Now, you've worked with both domestic and international corporates and nonprofits. What are some differences you've noticed, especially with regard to how your areas of practice are received?
That's a great question, Giti, and I think couple of areas. One is, and I don't, of course, want to generalize, but generally speaking, a lot of the international organizations, and this is reflected in the MNCs that we see around us, have an absolutely strong focus on governance and doing the right thing. There is no chalta hai attitude there. Uh, and they want to take preemptive steps to prevent something from going wrong.
Hmm.
Of course, they are prioritizing business and profits, but they give human rights and employee well-being equal importance. So much so that this is not just limited to their direct employees, but it also extends to employees in their supply chains or employees of investee entities in which they are going to be giving any kind of grants or funding in the long run. Second, I think, and this is without fail, most of the international mandates I have worked on, there is a deep involvement of the General Counsel or the legal office. I
Hmm.
think they understand that matters of equality, anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, equity, you cannot run these initiatives with a very strong legal lens in terms of what is doable, what is not doable, uh, and to balance out to ensure that you are not doing something which leaves exposure on the table. So, in most of these mandates internationally, I have seen the GC office closely involved, which is something I don't find in India. I
Yes.
find some kind of a condescension कि HR का काम है, but I keep telling them that our constitutional principles start with equality and non-discrimination, right? And it is your mandate. You must be one of the stakeholders who is involved in the discussion, because eventually, when you get down to implementation, you are going to match it up against what is allowed and not allowed, and what can really be done within the framework of Indian law. So you can't really run away and put it on somebody else's.
Right. Okay. Now, as you said, Indian law firms and Indian firms in general, Indian corporates and nonprofits do have a different take on this, probably because it was such a new field in India. And it's still quite an unheard of area. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are starting out or lawyers who may be trying to establish a practice in a new or emerging field of law?
So I think again, and I say this to everyone who assumes I have left the law or I have started an NGO, that this is core law. Please read the Constitution of India. It talks about non-discrimination and equality in absolutely fundamental terms. This is another way of practicing law, and the law I practice cut across from the Constitution to employment laws to laws around persons with disability or trans persons. So it's almost looking at all the laws in India from a different lens.
Mhm.
Uh, in terms of anybody who wants to start out on their own, become a legal entrepreneur like me, or just set out their own practice, I think some of the fundamentals, Giti, remain the same. There is no shortcut. Hard work with high quality, high professionalism, and very strong ethics. Those are my key mantras, so to speak, for any work I have done in the past 2 decades. I also want to reiterate to people who are starting off or youngsters that the best person in the room is not always the oldest person or the most senior. The best lawyer in that room is the person who knows the file like no one else. You can answer whatever question comes up. What is the law? What are the gaps? What are the facts? Um, what is risk mitigation? What is market practice? What are the others doing that we should do, should not do? I think if you spend your time researching and thinking through, you can be the best lawyer in the room, even if you are the youngest in the room. The next thing, of course, is that the best business development tool for lawyers is high quality and high professionalism. I can assure you that high quality work and high professionalism will get you more work than any other social media post will ever do. So it's important to focus on the basics of of good quality work, and also staying very clear from peer pressure. That's something I have seen really take a lot of importance in the current digital age that we're living in. But my candid advice to folks is to not engage in anything that lowers the professional standard, like paid awards and rankings. Everyone knows it's fake, and if you're paying to buy a nomination or award, it actually takes away from your own reputation or credibility. So slow and steady with the basics of good work, good ethics. It will take you much longer and far ahead in the profession than anything else.
Okay, this is a field from all accounts, from what you've just told me. This seems to be a field that law students and young lawyers would be interested in if they knew more about it. So, what are some things that you would want to tell them about this work?
Sure. I think I want to reiterate that this is another form of taking our constitutional principles of equality and non-discrimination further. It looks at all the existing laws and policies from that lens of business and human rights. In India, though we see a lot of diversity around us, the legal protection or the rights do not unfortunately extend to all dimensions of diversity. So it's a new field in terms of it seeks to address the gaps that even the legal frameworks give out and are unable to fulfill. It, of course, is very high quality work with a lot of credibility. I think most of my clients are, large international corporates who've been doing this for many years. So you have to be at the top of your game. You cannot just walk in and try and wing it without doing the work that you need to. Uh, in addition to the hard work which any legal practice brings in, there's a very high scope for innovation and thinking out of the box because we have done the tried and tested legal frameworks, and the gaps there have not answered all the questions. So it gives you that ability to create frameworks through the contractual framework or internal policy framework that can lead to a lot of creative work uh, and also develop your own skill and confidence as a lawyer, because you're not one day you're talking to the chairperson of a large conglomerate and the next day you're talking to a support staff, a mali or a driver in a company, and trying to explain to them what is their rights and how can we ensure more dignity of labor for them. So the variety of people you meet and how you're able to dovetail your advice to meet the specifics of the client and who you're talking to, I think it's one of the most fulfilling learning curves that I have seen in my life.
Okay. You have been advising some law firms in India as well, about their internal DEI initiatives. What are your views on the legal sector in India? Is it truly inclusive?
So that's a layered question, Giti. Yes, we're advising, I think, 10 to 12 of the leading law firms in India on their own internal initiatives, ranging from diversity, equity, and inclusion to anti-workplace harassment. Um, I think if I were to look at the tier one or two law firms, which are mostly in the metropolitan cities and who have crossed a particular number, on gender, they're doing very well. We have seen a lot more women. When I started in 2005, there were not as many women in corporate law like we see today. So on gender, of course, the quantity and quality of what is being done in terms of initiatives, etc., they're doing fairly well. But I think on other areas or other dimensions of diversity, LGBT inclusion, person with disability, I think a lot needs to be done. Simply organizing one talk on Pride Month or Disability Month or changing the logo is not enough. I think a lot needs to be done, and I would, kind of implore them, especially given they are at the top end of the market, to do more for other dimensions of diversity as well. Now, if you keep the top law firms, the tier one, tier two law firms aside, if you look at the larger legal practice, the judiciary, the law chambers, I think unfortunately we are still years behind even on gender. So leave aside other aspects of diversity, person with disability, so sexual orientation, ethnicity, we are far away from. I've been reading reports, including on Bar and Bench and others, how even basic infrastructure is not there. Or a woman judge sitting somewhere, she gets threatened by the very person she seeks to penalize for a crime the person has done. So if you look at core aspects of inclusion, which start with safety, non-discrimination, and then go to the other end of positive inclusion, I think a lot still needs to.
Okay, what sort of work do you see Samana doing in the next 5 years?
I think we hope to continue doing what we're doing. In the past 7 years, we've had 1,000 plus client mandates. Our work has touched, directly, indirectly 20 million people. Hopefully, we will continue to work and have a similar kind of impact. Again, numbers don't really excite me in terms of milestones, but I hope to double the work that we have done, keeping quality, of course, as one of the key metrics on the basis of which we work.
Thank you so much, Aparna, and I hope to speak to you again when Samana has completed another 7 years. Good luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, and thanks again to Bar and Bench for giving us this platform to talk about our work as change makers. Thank you.